right now. Pittsburgh's best sports show is about to begin. Call us or tweet us. We've got things to talk about on the Ireland Contracting Nightly Sports Call.
All right, thanks a lot, Ken, and thank you for tuning into the Ireland Contracting Nightly Sports Call. I'm Rich Walsh alongside Paul Zeise, and we have a lot to talk about tonight, and one of the main things to talk about is Antonio Brown. Is this saga finally over, Paul Zeise? He's cut by the New England Patriots, been the big story. Everyone's talking about it today. He should have never even been signed by the New England Patriots, and I guess they realized after 11 days that he is nothing but a distraction after another accuser comes forward because of a Sports Illustrated story, and then he responded by sending the accuser threatening, intimidating, menacing text messages that made their way onto social media and into the hands of the NFL. And so you saw Bill Belichick walk out of his press conference today. A couple hours later, Antonio Brown was cut.
Well, I mean, I'm surprised it took this long, to be honest. But you know what? Here's the thing. You want to talk about a guy that's just completely sabotaged his career.
Yeah.
Hopefully now, I would hope that the NFL would kind of put the word out to teams. Listen, if you're going to try and sign this guy, wait till next year. Let him get through all this stuff. If you're a team next year, you want to kick the tires on him, I get it. But, boy, if there's another team that's going to step up and try and sign him this year, I just think that sends a horrible message. I thought it would send a horrible message that the Patriots picked him up. But
I thought it was collusion.
They basically did the right thing by getting, they finally had to. I'm just saying, to me, they're out of their minds.
I can't see it happening, though. But I said this, 3 weeks ago, when the whole thing was going on with the Oakland Raiders, that, no way anyone's going to pick him up. And then 4 hours later, the Patriots pick him up. I thought that was collusion.
Here's the thing. What happens if some of this stuff goes away in the next 3 or 4 weeks and the team needs a receiver? I mean, hey, look.
What would go away? There's a civil lawsuit.
Okay, the civil suit.
Okay, the civil suit goes away.
What if the commissioner says we're not going to suspend Antonio Brown? We don't feel like there's enough there.
Well, then I think that's what would have to happen.
Now all of a sudden he says, okay, he's not going to be suspended, which means he's available. Now you're a team that needs a receiver and you're in the playoff hunt. I mean,
can the NFL force him to get help?
No.
Do you think he needs help?
I think the thing about it is if they would suspend him, they could have a plan for him that he needs to get help to come back. Yes. But in terms of right now, he's not suspended. What are they going to give him?
Well, there's an investigation going on. Something can happen out of that.
There is. But my point is,
there's that commissioner exempt list.
Yeah, there is. They could put him on that. But until they put him on that, he's available. And you know how it is. I mean, what was the guy's name that?
Give me a team that would be interested, you think? I mean, the Bengals, they're out of it. They got two receivers.
How about OBJ goes down in Cleveland? Gets hurt.
Well, if someone gets hurt.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
Teams want to win. Teams want to win. Andy Reid, remember Andy Reid had, he had 2 sons that were involved in like all kinds of drug stuff, and I think one actually died of an overdose or whatever it was.
I think you're right.
They got arrested, all that kind of stuff, and so that's why he brought in Michael Vick, if you remember, when he was in Philadelphia. He wants to be the guy that sort of rehabs people.
How about a young quarterback, maybe like
if Antonio Brown decided, okay, I'm going to put all this foolishness behind me, I'm going to play for
Philadelphia.
And you put him with the Chiefs?
Chiefs, Philadelphia.
I'm just saying.
I'm trying to think of other teams that might need someone. The Jets.
What we've found is teams want to win a lot more than they want to do the right thing. So, I'm not saying that he's going to get signed again, but until we're at week 17 and he isn't on a team still, then I'll believe it.
So, he cost himself millions of dollars now. Probably he would have made, close to $20 million with the Steelers.
Right.
Forced his way out of there. Got a better deal with the Raiders because he was getting more guaranteed money. Didn't make any money there. Forced his way out of there. Signed a halfway decent deal with the Patriots.
Yeah.
Plus an option year for next year would have been worth up to $35 million. That's all gone.
Yeah.
He's made, he'll only make $150,000. Not only. That's a good chunk of change, but I'm saying
one game check
compared to what he would have gotten a $5 million check on Monday if he was on the roster.
And he's a guy that can't afford to lose money because he
buys $500,000 necklaces.
He's going to be broke. 5 years from now, if he doesn't play again, he's going to be broke.
Give me a prediction. If he can't play football ever again, I think he'll play at some point. Don't know when it is. What does he do for a living? I mean, what happens to this guy?
You know, the problem is
he can't be an analyst. He can't be a coach.
He's made himself so toxic. It's going to be hard for him to get endorsements. It's going to be hard for him. I mean, it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough. I mean, the thing you find out in this world is if you have fame, there's always an outlet for you somewhere. I mean, Jose Canseco still finds ways to make money doing, being, you know what I'm saying? What's the chick, the skater that hired someone to hit the.
Oh, Tonya Harding.
Tonya Harding.
Yeah, but she's been down and out for a long time until that movie came out. But she keeps bouncing back.
As I mean, she keeps bouncing back. If you've got fame, there's always some. I know he can be like.
There's not going to be an outlet out there.
Flav and do one of those reality shows on MTV.
There's not going to be an outlet out there where this guy's going to make $30 million in 2 years.
You mean to tell me if MTV decided they wanted to do some sort of a reality show with him, that people wouldn't watch it and that he wouldn't get paid for it? I mean, that's the country we live in.
So that's his only. Saying, that would be his only.
Something like that. Again, we have this, 15-year-old girl who's a multimillionaire because basically she was disrespectful to her mother on Maury or Dr. Phil or one of those shows, the Cash Me Outside girl.
Yeah, I don't know who.
She's a reality star.
Oh, okay.
She was on Dr. Phil
Yeah.
because she was real disrespectful to her mother at 13 years old.
Yeah.
And there was a bunch of people in the audience, basically laughing at her. And she was like, yeah, Catch Me Outside. And then she became the Catch Me Outside girl. She's made like a career. She's like multi-million-dollar person. So I don't put it past anybody in this world.
Yeah, reality
and if you've got a little bit of fame and name recognition, you know what? I think that he's going to find something, I'm sure.
All right, well, we're going to be taking
finding something. It was
the Pirates are down 10-1.
Every time I look over there, they're giving up more runs.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to get any Pirates calls. Oh, although we do have a couple Pirates calls tonight. All right, 412-575-2600 is the number. Give us a call. We'll be back in 2 minutes.
The Ireland Contracting Nightly Sports Call is brought to you by Ireland Contracting, celebrating 25 years as Pittsburgh's #1 home exterior expert in roofing, siding, windows, and gutters, where honesty and integrity still matter.